Let's head back to our conversation now with Tim Brentnell, Post Office scandal former sub-postmaster. And also in the studio, we're joined by Nick Wallis, a journalist who's worked on this as well, writing a book called The Great Post Office Scandal. Look, coming to you, Tim, I hope you were able to hear what was being said there, pretty much as would be expected. But did you expect that a TV drama would lead to the moment that we're actually getting this to be sort of taken very seriously, not only in the House of Commons, by the whole country?
No, I didn't expect it would take a TV drama, but we've been campaigning about this for over a decade. Journalists like Nick have been doggedly campaigning on our behalf, and it felt like banging our head against a wall at some point. And if it took a TV drama to bring it to the public conscious as it needs to be, then I can't complain about that at all.
What would you like to see happen from the government side of things now? They are discussing this in the Commons as we speak. What kind of outcome would you like to see?
Well, the route to compensation or redress needs to be sped up because people like myself have had our convictions quashed now for 2.5 years, and we haven't, apart from a small interim payment, haven't received anywhere near the recompense that we're due. But I'm also hoping that the government is going to say they're going to do something about all the other people that haven't managed to have their convictions quashed. Those people need to have sort of an amnesty or a blanket quashing of their convictions, because no post office conviction is safe.
What kind of impact, just for those who are coming to this story for the first time, maybe they've seen the drama, maybe they haven't, but just give us a sense of the impact this has had on your life, Tim?
Well, it was devastating. I bought my village shop and post office with a view to being able to stay and work in the area that I grew up in and wanted to serve my community. And that was all ripped away from me back in 2010. I lost my job as at the post office. The retail business took a huge a decrease in sales because people didn't want to come to a business where they thought a fraudster was running it, or someone that had their hand in the till or stealing old people's pensions. I've had a fraud conviction on my criminal record for the past 12 years, so I haven't been able to find any other kind of meaningful work.
It's extraordinary, and I'm deeply sorry that this has happened to you, and I hope that you do see the justice that you want to see and that you've been campaigning for so long. Look, in terms of since the TV drama came out, Mr Bates versus the Post Office last week, in the last few days, have you had interactions with members of the public or even people who sort of knew you throughout this? Have they been surprised?
The drama did a fantastic job of getting across two things, both how horribly post office has behaved towards us over the last decade, and the toll or the cost it's taken on us, both in a business and personally. So there's been a great outpouring of sympathy and compassion in the last week, which is very welcome.
Tim, thank you for giving us your personal experience. Let's bring in Nick Wallis now. You mentioned him. He's a journalist that's been working doggedly, was Tim's words there. And I think that's very fair, Nick. It's great to see you in the studio. This has been a huge part of your work for the last few years, but did you expect to see this type of reaction from a docudrama?
No, not at all. And I must just pay tribute to Tim, who's been an incredible advocate for the sub-postmaster's cause, suffered horribly, got his conviction quashed, appeared at the inquiry last year and gave the most eloquent speech about this. It wasn't just the IT system, it was the people who ran the post office, who prosecuted these sub-postmasters ineptly and incompetently, that created this scandal. And I would urge people to seek it out, because it went briefly viral on Twitter. But in terms of the way the drama has come about, I was approached in 2020 by a lady called Natasha Bondi from Little Gem Productions. She said, I think this would make a great documentary. And then she went away and thought, actually, what this should be, this could be an amazing drama, because that way it will be able to connect and resonate with people. She took that idea to Patrick Spence, who was at that time running ITV Studios. They pitched it to ITV, and in a way, the rest is history. It took a long time to get off the ground. And there are many things that could have gone wrong with it, but it was the avowed intention of the executive production team to ensure that they remained absolutely true to the postmaster's experience and tell their story as faithfully as they could, whilst relying on transcripts, documents, judgments and the like, but going into these sub-postmasters' lives, asking them once more to tell their story and to put it out into the public domain, which is a very difficult process for people to have to go through. But the effect has been extraordinary, and I'm just delighted that it's now at the top of the news agenda.
What do you make of the criticisms that have been levied over the last 24 hours, that A, there wasn't enough reporting, which I know you basically devoted your life to this for years.
It was not for lack of trying, Rosanna, I promise you.
So why did people not sit up and pay attention until now?
It's a very difficult story to tell. And if you're an editor working in a busy newsroom and someone like me wanders up to them and says, well, look, I've got a story about sub-postmasters, immediately they're saying, well, what's a sub-postmaster? How am I going to explain that in a 3-line news bulletin? And then there was the big issue that many of these sub-postmasters pleaded guilty to crimes that they then said they didn't commit. And so that creates a natural barrier in terms of people's perception of the story. But also, there needs to be an awful lot of checking out of their story, because if you're convicted by the criminal courts, you have to do an awful lot of due diligence to make sure that their story stands up. I was very lucky. A man came to me, he told me that his pregnant wife had been thrown in prison for a crime she didn't commit. She was the sub-postmaster at West Byfleet in Surrey. I listened to his story. By that stage, the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance was already in existence. I got to speak to Alan Bates, who is the titular Mr. Bates versus the Post Office in the drama. And it very soon became apparent that although none of these people had hard evidence there was anything wrong with this computer system, there were dozens of them all over the country, all of whom had previously spotless records. And I just kept thinking, well, either these people are deluded or fantasists or just plain wrong, but if they're right, this is huge. And I suppose that was the mystery to me 10 years ago, why other journalists weren't necessarily going, hang on a minute. And that was the thing for me. That's what made me stick at it, and the fact that I kept hearing from sub-postmasters who were in desperate straits. And I thought, you know, unless someone focuses on this story, more and more lives are going to be ruined.
And, you know, that we can understand why people plead guilty, even if they're innocent of something. You know, we hear about this through wrongful convictions and other types of crimes as well.
Yeah, it's very hard, though, because unless you've been in that situation, and what I'm repeatedly told is that you've got a harassed criminal barrister who's maybe, you know, his job or her job is basically to keep people out of prison. They get yet another case that they spend maybe 15 minutes looking at, and they weigh up the options, and their advice is, look, if you plead guilty, there's a very good chance you won't go to prison. And they're talking to people who are desperate, who have lost everything, who trusted in the post office, who trusted in the criminal justice system. And now suddenly these good people, fine upstanding citizens, as you said in your introduction, are faced with the prospect of going to prison unless they plead guilty. It's an awful catch-22 situation to be in. And I think the way the criminal justice system operates needs to be very carefully looked at, because it has created this environment whereby people do plead guilty, which is just obviously so wrong. And yet it hamstrung them for the rest of their lives. They couldn't, as Tim was saying, couldn't get any meaningful work going forward, couldn't work with money again, lost their standing in the community, can't get insurance, can't... You know, there's all sorts of implications that come from a guilty plea and a conviction. And so, yeah, it's a real cautionary tale that shows up so many different failures within so many different areas of our society that we should all feel ashamed of.
And a miscarriage of this scale, so many players involved. We were talking about Fujitsu at the start there with its Horizon software.
Yes.
You've got the Post Office as well, the government, where were they, the judges, everything else. Look, before we run out of time, I do want to get back to Tim, who was listening into that conversation, Tim. And Nick brought up then that it's incredibly tough for you all, survivors, if we can call you that, those who have been through this scandal, to then relive the story once again. But do you hope that this is the last time?
I hope that something's going to happen off the back of this last week. We've all pushed ourselves over the weekend and the last few days to put our stories across there again, to just reinforce what the drama did and let people know how despicable the Post Office have been and how hurt and desperate we all were.
I think that has definitely come across in the docudrama, in the ITV drama. And Nick, in a sense, ITV rolled the dice on this one. They didn't know, like you were saying there, you're trying to convince editors and newsrooms to cover this story. You could convince a TV channel to make a documentary of it. Surely this is going to be considered something of a success for them.
I think the channel have done a fantastic job in positioning this drama in a way that people would consume it across the week. It was in the first week in January when many people are at home, they're not going out, so they knew it would get some eyeballs on it. But So many things could have gone wrong, but they managed to bring everything together. Incredible direction, incredible script writing from Gwyn Hughes, incredible cast, of course, Toby Jones leading that ensemble cast brilliantly. And yes, it cost millions, and it was a big gamble, but they felt that this story was something worth telling. Everyone believed in it. And I hear that the head of drama at ITV has said it's the best thing that she's ever commissioned. And I actually hope there becomes more production line stories like this, where commissioning editors go out looking for stories that have a strong journalistic pedigree that speaks to miscarriages of justice, which do exist across all sectors of society, and give them the same amount of oxygen.
Nick Wallis, it's been great having you in the studio. You're also going to be in the studio later
Yes.
this week presenting this very show. So if you enjoyed
that
that conversation, get much more of Nick on Wednesday and Thursday this week. And Tim Brentnell, who joined us down the line. We really, really appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best in the coming days. Well, next year on Prime Time, back to school in Westminster today. And